Well, hello. Today I want to speak about fear. There's been a lot of panic in the world, a lot of fear since the COVID-19 virus has spread around the world. Take a look at your 401ks and you can see the result of fear. Better yet, don't look. Some things are better left alone. Fear is not imaginary, it's real, and we know it. There is healthy fear which borders on respect. For example, I may have a fear of fire because I know its destructive power. Yet we use fire all the time in life in positive ways. Fire warms, we can cook by it. It is even soothing to watch a fire which is controlled and contained on a cool fall evening. So we respect fire's power and fear fire when we can no longer control it. Such is healthy. But fear is often spawned by threats and often rooted in the what-ifs of life. Those projected what-ifs, and the more we focus on the what-ifs, the bigger the threats get and the greater our fear grows. As I think about fear, I'm reminded of a shepherd boy named David who became Israel's king. The army of Israel, led by King Saul, came face to face with the Philistine army. In order to save nations' armies in those days from total destruction, it was very common to choose a warrior from each army to do battle. Whichever warrior won the hand-to-hand conflict, their army and their nation would be declared the winner of the battle. So the Philistines sent out a warrior named Goliath. Goliath was a huge man. His weapons were likewise larger than most. So large was he that Samuel records that when Goliath came out and challenged the Israelites to send out their warrior to duel with him, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Israel's army were God's representatives. But faced with Goliath, they only represented fear. How true it is when we face things greater than ourselves, things we can't control, things we can't master. So often we become obsessed with the threat. We become focused on the threat. And the result is that the threat grows larger each moment of each day. With the growth of the threat in our mind, fear rises and rises, higher and higher, and becomes all-consuming as well. In fact, the threat, due to our fear, often becomes greater than it actually is in reality. This happened to the army of Israel, and it happened to Saul, who was king. For 40 days, twice a day, Goliath came out and challenged the Israelites. For 40 days, twice a day, he belittled them and the God they represented. Goliath grew stronger and bigger each day. Every morning and every evening he grew. Goliath and his arms became larger and larger each time he challenged Israel's leaders and army. Fear had gripped them. David's brothers were serving in the army at this time, and his father Jesse sent him with supplies to his brothers and their commanders. And when he arrived, he heard that King Saul had offered a reward to any man who would take on Goliath. David, at the rebuke of his brothers, volunteered. King Saul was so glad he really didn't care that much that a shepherd boy stepped forward. So David rose to the challenge. What was the difference between David and the rest of the army? It was what he focused on. It was what he saw. It was what he believed and whom he trusted. When David walked out onto the battlefield and walked up to a man that towered over him, David proclaimed what he saw, what he believed, and what he had experienced while caring for his father's flock. And he says to old Goliath, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands. And all those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." What a great lesson for us. What should we see in the midst of a threat? Whom are we focused on? David reminds us that God is God, and our battles are his battles. So as the psalmist writes, "I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth."